Welcome back to another episode of Into the Airbnb, where we talk with Airbnb hosts about their short-term rental experience. Today's guests are Danielle and Marco Cepeda. They own and manage over 30 short-term rental units in downtown Hollywood, Florida. Join us today to hear about their great story and experiences as short-term rental owners, learn some insights from the market, and also get some tips from these amazing hosts. This episode is sponsored by Airbnb, short-term rental analytics for high-return investments, comprehensive data for insights, ideas, and inspiration. Go to app.airbnb.com to find precise Airbnb data such as occupancy rate, revenue, average daily rate, and so on. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, can you please tell me when did you get started on Airbnb and how was it?
We purchased a 10-unit in 2017, located near downtown Hollywood, and one of the tenants sort of started falling behind pretty much right away. And there was like a Hurricane Irma. He was, very concerned about that. So he ended up going back to, I guess, his parents' house for about a month, 2 months, and he was just never able to catch up from there. So what we decided to do as a way to sort of recover some of our legal fees, since he was falling behind about 2-3 months, we just decided to furnish it and see if we can make a little bit of money back. After 6 months, we had another tenant who wanted to move to North Carolina. We were like, that's fine. So we got the idea of, why don't we try this again on this one, because it was a mirror image of our other studio. So me and Danielle started furnishing as sort of like a meditative oasis, still the name today. And we put in something a little bit different, like moss art, hanging on the wall. We put a little yoga mat, meditation cushion, and it became our most popular one. So that was number 2. And then a year later, we took over a 2-2 that a tenant left. They wanted more space, basically. And we converted that to a short-term rental as well. And so now we have 2 studios and 1 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So 3 listings out of the 10 that are short-term.
Now that you have the experience with both long-term rentals and short-term rentals, can you tell me which one would you rather and why?
I think it has to be a balance. So, there's the business side of it, and then there's the personal side of it. Short-term rental can be risky. So, if you're comfortable with the risk, then it can be lucrative, and it can also, be fun. But long-term is safe for obvious reasons. And, if you have a lot of expenses and you have a bad season, or let's say, you have a very, very seasonal area where all of your money is made in one season, you never know if that season is going to go well or not. And if that season doesn't go well, then you might have had a bad year looking back. So that's why we took our 10 unit, we only did 3 of them as short term, because there's also like insurance considerations, it might affect your insurance. So, for us, we like to balance like the short term and the long term. But I think for other people, if they have like a long-term rental portfolio, then yeah, it might make sense to take like 30% of those, or maybe even 40% are in the short term. And if you don't like it, you can go back, But if you're buying like short term specifically, and you find that it's not working out, then, you have to have a backup plan, which could be long term. So if it's not working on the long-term basis, then, that's basically, it's more risky. So you have to really know what you're doing in that case.
And how much more than the long term were you perceiving at that time with the short term rentals? The ones that were on Airbnb where people stayed a month or something?
It was probably around maybe 15 to 25% more. These days, it's like probably 2-3 times the monthly, so back then, you have to sort of make a trade-off, and, which is whether it's pandemic or not, between obviously occupancy and price point. So our thinking was, we are trading in some income for occupancy. I'd rather have, so we try to target like at least 75% occupancy regardless of the season. And then the price point goes up or down depending on how much demand there is. So, that's basically the formula that we use. And we kept that throughout the whole pandemic. We kept like, I think over 80% during the pandemic. We're still pretty much at 80% on average. And we just happened to be booked out through the summer this time around because even though our prices are higher and we reduce our discounts, there was like a wave of demand that came in during the winter, like and kind of pushed through the entire summer. So a lot of people like that. They can do the extended stay with us. They like the office amenities. So they just booked, like in February, March, up until like August. So we didn't really discount much at all, but, we were just targeting our normal 75 to 80% occupancy. And the demand was just so high that now we have like 90% plus occupancy. So, we're just going to let that, continue. And then once the bookings start to slow down, then we're going to go back to, 75% or so.
Oh, that's really nice. That's a good strategy to, target a certain occupancy rate so you can kind of, work with that. That's really great. One thing that I would like to ask you about would be the investment you put into these short-term rentals and how is the return on investment going so far?
So we have the 2 that we originally launched. We put in a bit of money, but that was because there was a layout change, so we added a bathroom, we changed the layouts. And these older buildings, you open up the wall, you don't know what you're gonna find until you open up the wall. So that was a 6-figure investment, but it definitely returns, a good 20% annually based on that. I think it was a good investment just on the long-term basis because of the improvements that we made. And then on the studios, we put in about, I think, $5,500 each for the renovation. We shut it down for like a month or two. And then we doubled our rates. I mean, we didn't expect our rates to be double. We were like, kind of targeting like a 25% conservatively, increase in the rate. But, this demand has just been so high that it ended up doubling. So it's been an amazing return right now.
So you made a lot of changes in that one. Can I know about how much did you spend investing on that tutu and how much are you getting on the return on investment like right now?
So that one, we didn't expect to spend what we spent, but we spent about $100,000. And the reason for that was because, we made all the typical mistakes of hiring the wrong contractors. We ended up having to redo the plumbing twice and the electrical twice, and there were gas lines. So we ended up spending probably 2-3 times more than we were estimating. But the return, I would say, was probably a good 20+%, 25% with the short term. So it was definitely worth it, But yeah, if I did it again, we would definitely have better contractors. We would have been able to not have to redo some of these, like the bathroom had to be redone, the plumbing had to be redone. So we did a lot of things twice because we did it wrong the first time.
Yeah, like some of the walls in one of the bathrooms were really old and we're just kind of learning. We're new at this. So, when you do tiling, for example, if you're working on an old wall, which isn't so clean anymore, and you put tiles on it, it's going to be very obvious that the wall is
not level.
Not level. So that's what happened. And so, now we realize like you want to hire a specialist for certain things like tiling. Even if you don't, let's say you have someone who's just good at tiling, but as long as they have like a good wall, now we kind of know like, okay, your walls have to be really pristine to be able to tile on them. But yeah, I would definitely not get just any guy who tiles. I would get, a licensed person who's a specialist.
But at least you learned from the experience, right?
It happen to anyone. It was very expensive schooling for us. But no, it was, thankfully we were able to, come out of it.
And this 20 to 25% you're talking about right now, so these 2 you launch on, spring 2018, right?
The 2-2 was at the end of 2019. So
2019.
it was like right around Thanksgiving in 2019. When we launched, we started with a maximum occupancy of 4, and then we went to 6, and then we peaked at 8 right before the shutdown started.
Right, we were really doing great,
and then so the shutdown started, and our occupancies still kind of continued on based on the momentum right into like April. But so those bookings basically expired, and they were used, and then that's when we were like, okay, let's just pull back and see what we're going to do now, because we have to figure out what our game plan is. And that's when we started pivoting from there. So
right. Yeah. Because everyone canceled.
It was about 3 weeks when we were like actually just sort of like vacant, but also because intentionally, because we weren't sure what direction we wanted to go with positioning and marketing and the occupancy,
Yeah, it's good that you took your own time to direction yourself, because it was, like a really extreme situation, the pandemic, nobody really knew how to do. So I think the fact that you took your own time and thought about the things really helped you go through it, right?
Yeah.
Another question I would like to make you is about the other studios you have. What about the investment on those and the return on investment that you're getting on them?
So we budgeted about $5,500 per studio for updating the kitchens and a little bit on the bathroom. And, our rates have doubled since we reopened them. So we were, I guess, making about somewhere, it depends on the season, but in the low season, for example, as low as maybe $60 a night. And then in the high season, we were making, 100 plus. And now our rates are probably closer to like $90 in the low season. And in the high season, we're actually, over like 150. So it really almost doubled since then. So we booked, since the beginning of the year, we've made already almost just as much money as we made last year, the whole year.
And can you please tell me about some numbers that you're getting with the short-term rentals? For example, the annual revenue you're perceiving with them, comparing, with the long-term rentals?
So the 3 short terms that we have out of the 10 units are making about the same amount as the 7 other units. So right now, we booked about as much as we made last year in the short term, and we're only about a little over halfway through. So it's about 75 for the short term and 75 for the long term.
And now that you told me this, that you're doing like the same amount of with both, would you ever think of doing more short-term rentals? So it's obviously doing very good, right? Because just 3 of them are doing the same amount as like 7 of the long-term rentals. Do you plan on opening more short-term rentals?
We do want to do one more, because so our property is 10 units, but it's 3 separate buildings. One building has 8 units, and then the other 2 are freestanding, like little duplex. Sort of, it's like a duplex, right? But they're like little bungalows, and they each have their own private entrance and private patios. So there is another freestanding unit. When they eventually move out, we are planning on making that unit into another short-term rental. But for insurance reasons, and because of our mortgage,
you don't want to do more than 4.
Yeah, you can't have more than a certain percentage, be short term, because then
liability.
Yeah. So we'll probably just do one more and then keep it at that. But this other property that we're under contract for, which is closing next week, is all short term. So it's 20 units and it's all short term.
Is it located about the same area that your actual buildings?
It's close. It's about 30 minutes north in the same county. So
it's closer to the beach. So it's 1 block.
Yes. So this property in downtown Hollywood, it's like in very South Broward. It's not far from Miami. And it's situated a 5-minute walk to the downtown area, which has a lot of fun, like bars and restaurants, but it's 2 miles from the beach. And then the new property is in Deerfield Beach, and it's just south of Boca Raton. And it's 1 block from the beach, so you can walk there in just a couple of minutes. So we're really excited about it.
Oh, that sounds really great. And how do
Thank
you
you.
plan on do the pricing for those 20 units?
So right now, for management reasons, we already planned on capitalizing on on the short stays, mid stays, and extended stays. So we're positioning it for that right off the bat. So we have office amenities. We're gonna, make sure the Wi-Fi is really strong. We're gonna make sure the kitchen's fully stocked. And so, we can accommodate the longer stays, meaning like, anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 months. But, people are going to want to come just to hang out by the pool. So there's the work from home crowd that, we're expanding towards. It's a very strong trend right now. So we're going to be accommodating, the working professionals and, the families and then everything in between.
So we're going to call that one Pier Walk on Deerfield Beach. And the one in Hollywood is called Palms at Young Circle in Hollywood, Florida.
Ooh, and do you plan to make those 20 units, themed as the ones you have right now?
Yeah, we're going to theme them. In some ways, that's the hardest part because you want it to be authentic, and it's got everything for operating as a short-term rental, but it doesn't have the personality yet. So what we're doing is we're positioning all of the amenities, and then at the end, we're going to create like the story and the profile and the personality of the property.
Right. That takes the most time. So, we're just going to ease into it. I think the most important thing out of the gate really is making sure that people are comfortable and have everything they need to feel like they're at home. Like if they want to cook, roast a chicken, they have all the stuff they need to do that. Because when we were doing our walkthrough, we noticed that they felt more like hotel rooms. They didn't really have enough, kitchen utensils and things like that in the kitchen, stuff for baking, measuring cups and measuring spoons and all of that kind of stuff for people to feel at home. And honestly, we need to get them rented right away. So we'll probably just start, accommodating people with what we have to start with. And that way we could pay our bills and keep it running. And then we'll probably do another launch within the next year or so with all of our themes ready, because that's going to take a lot of time for us to, roll out.
First thing I'd like to ask you about is the financing of this building you're opening right now, the 20 units one. If you can tell me about how was it, how long did it take, what method did you use?
So originally when we were negotiating with the seller, the broker already has, they usually have a mortgage broker on their team, the more established ones. So they want to be able to sell it, for a buyer maybe who wants the financing. So we were connected with a mortgage broker that was part of the team, and it was a local credit union, which surprised me, and they were offering 65% leverage with pretty competitive mortgage terms. It was a 5-year fixed on the 30-year schedule. But we were doing a reverse 1031 exchange, meaning that we were selling a property in New York, but we were buying this property first. So we had to fund it up front, which means that we had to make sure we had enough money to do the down payment. So we went with another bank that is giving us 70% loan to value, and the rate is just a little bit higher. It's about 4.99% on a 5-year. So that works, it works on a long-term basis. It works on a short-term basis, obviously. So it was a little bit harder because we haven't sold our New York property yet. When you're doing a 1031 exchange, you have to come up with a full down payment, and then, you can sort of reimburse yourself from the sale after the fact. But these are banks that are both local because they know the area, they feel comfortable, they can go there themselves. Maybe they live in the area, and they're smaller banks. So they have sort of like a flat hierarchy where, they want to work with you, and you don't have to go through like 4 levels of approval to get, to get a really strong indication of whether they have an appetite for that kind of property. So I'd recommend, looking at the local banks, ideally for like a short-term rental market, unless it's like a very, very prime location and you can just fund it on a long-term basis. But if you're looking for, funding it as a short term, then the local banks are your best bet, the ones that are like a little bit smaller and they have their own budgets. And so, if they're ready to do a short-term rental and they have this pool of money that they're looking to put out there, then those are the ones I would recommend.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting information. Thank you for that. So another thing that I would like to ask you about is the challenges that you've been having as an Airbnb host. Any challenge can be with the guests, can be with the Airbnb platform. Any particular challenges that you have in this time being Airbnb hosts?
I think we're sort of learning about how they work more and more. We're finding that the more that you sort of interact with your own listing, like the more you update your own listing, the more you get bumped up in their AI. If you just make a listing and then you just set it there and you don't do anything for years, the listing will kind of die. We're realizing that like listings are sort of like living things on Airbnb. So you have to work the listing regularly for you to stay, in their searches. Like it's just a weird thing that we're kind of finding, because we did notice when they did a new rollout in the middle of May or early May, we weren't getting any inquiries for like maybe a couple of weeks. And then we did a couple of little changes to our listing and then it got bumped up again. Or I don't know, it could have also just been because that's the low season now, like May is the low season. So I don't know. I know a lot of other local people have been having challenges with Airbnb and the search algorithms, that they just rolled out. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Like maybe there's something to that, or I don't know if it's like the space is getting more saturated or a combination of things. Like last summer, people were still not traveling abroad, but now they are. So it could just also be fewer people are coming to this area because now they're able to travel abroad more easily. So I don't really know. It could be a lot of these things. But I do know what I just said is that, interacting with your own listing regularly is important. So we try to do that. Also, like, responding to people, inquiries quickly is important. And also honestly, even if you're really frustrated and angry, being really nice to anybody who you talk to on Airbnb is so important because they're there to help you. Everyone has their own abilities. So not everyone has the same training as everyone else, but it's not their fault if something happens and they're there to help you. So it's important to, be respectful and just try to like stick to facts. Like don't let your emotions, get the better of you because, people are just there to do a job and, we're here to do a job. So that's important because, we live in fear sometimes of like getting someone on the phone and having a misunderstanding and then kind of getting shut down by Airbnb. So,
yeah, I think the biggest challenge right now is we're doing great on bookings and occupancy and rates and everything. You still are dependent on Airbnb to a large degree. So that risk of not having, direct bookings, I think is probably the biggest challenge that we have because any day you can wake up and there's an update on Airbnb and maybe it doesn't make sense for you anymore. So if you have a good location and you have a good property and, you have good demand, then, you should try to get direct bookings as much as possible because right now Airbnb has the relationship with the guests, not you, to a large degree. So
exactly.
They're booking you because you're on Airbnb, not because they found your listing, outside of Airbnb. So having that risk is always there. And then I think, once you're getting bookings on Airbnb, then you should probably try to get a direct website, like we did. And that way you always have some level of control of your business.
One thing I'd like to ask you about is if there are any particular advantages or disadvantages of doing direct booking versus Airbnb.
Yeah, we use a direct booking website to market both our long-term and short-term because why not, and then when we want to find a vendor, for example, we go on Google Maps and we look for the ones that have like, say 4.8 stars or more, or they have 20 reviews or more. So if you could be that vendor, on the short-term rental side, you have some credibility because these are third-party reviews. These are reviews that are not just in your total control. So that it has some legitimacy to it. So I think having that sort of legitimacy, that's where Airbnb is so powerful, because just being on Airbnb gives you a high level of credibility. So it takes a lot to build that credibility outside of Airbnb, and that's the disadvantage. But but being able to do that gives you control over your business. So you can use Airbnb to build your direct booking business. You have to be careful, obviously, because you need to respect their rules about you can't solicit to them directly. But if you build a relationship with them and you build credibility outside of the platform, then you can get your direct booking. So it's harder to get, but once you do, then you have control over your destiny.
Yeah, and so our goal is to get more and more of these direct bookings. We don't get that many now just because we haven't really focused. We haven't done any marketing campaigns specifically for short term.
Because we've been booked.
Yeah, we've been working on this upcoming purchase a lot, and fielding leads as they come through takes a lot of time. So, once we expand more and we have a dedicated person to field all of these leads that come through and capture all of that data, then we're planning on doing that, because we want to not have all of our eggs in the Airbnb basket. It's a little bit scary, but they've been great to us. We've really taken off, and it's been wonderful for the most part.
Yeah, we're afraid to raise our rates because they're so high already, and other people are experiencing like a big slowdown right now. But apparently that's not the case with us at all. So it's the opposite. So we get a lot of leads through Airbnb, and they're asking, if we have availability, and we say, well, nope, sorry, we're all booked. So now we have these 20 units, and we can tell them, yes, we have something available.
I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens. Like I said, it's on the other side of the county. It's not as close to Miami, but it is close to Meisner Park in Boca Raton, and and walking to the beach is definitely a big draw. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Last thing I would like to ask you about is if there are any tips that you like to give out for any hosts, that might be just starting, or other hosts around your area. Any type of host, really? Any tips that you like to give to them?
Just to recap some of the things we said, like, personalize your listing and as much as you can, and also share about who you are and your story. So adding personality is important. Interacting with your own listing is important. And obviously, fielding, any inquiries that you get quickly is important. I would say like having a mentor is always helpful, or like tapping into, those relationships that might
just a lot of
be able to guide you a
Facebook
little bit.
Group host
right.
Groups.
That was the next thing I was going to say. Yeah.
And they're very helpful, so you can get a lot of great advice there. Even if it's not great, it's still free.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, sometimes people will go onto these groups to kind of vent, because you obviously can't vent and complain when things are not going well with a guest. So they go onto the sites and they kind of like commiserate a little bit, and, and look for support. And, it's a stressful thing to be in hospitality. So I get that. So you're going to definitely see a lot of that on those sites, but there are a lot of useful tips too. Like, I learned how to get, stains out of a quartz countertop, or, makeup stains out of towels, and, pen stains and things like that. I don't know, just a lot of like random tips that you get, like how to handle somebody who, doesn't check in and then wants a refund right away. And, ideas on how to respond to a guest, or how to respond to a guest review, and people will share their templates for you. And that's one thing that my friend Alicia did. And this was the friend who had that Airbnb in Hawaii. She had been doing it for several years. She sent me all of her email or her message templates. So it's important to have like saved templates, so that every time you reply to a guest or a potential guest, you have like kind of like a template to start from, like, a thank you for booking template, like a mid-stay check-in template. Like, they checked in 2 days ago. Now I'm going to send a quick, not everyone does this. Some people do, things like that, or like general questions about like mail delivery or package delivery. Like we have all of these responses kind of saved. So it's good to kind of have that ready to go before you start.
I would say that, screening is probably one of the biggest things.
Yes.
We have the benefit of having learned to do it on the long-term basis. We've done it with, a shopping center, 18-bay shopping center, and now we do it with short-term. So I think the screening process is very important to make sure that, like I said, we feel like a big responsibility to the community that is part of our 10 units. So we want to protect them and we want to make sure we have good guests. And so we screen the long-term and the short-term and with similar principles, meaning that we want them to have reviews. We want them to be communicative. We want them to, be willing to share information, that's required for a reservation, typical things like, the front of their ID and signing all, acknowledging all our agreements and house rules and quiet hours. So guests who are very willing to go through that process with us usually are the best guests.
That's
true. The guests who give resistance and, maybe they are not as communicative or, for whatever reason, a lot of times those are the ones that, that are not going to be the best guests. So I think the screening is one of the key things to prevent a lot of issues. And then the second, me and Danielle talked about this a few times, where I feel like it missed the mark when we rent Airbnbs is because of an expectation that was missed, And when I go to a hotel, a lot of times there's an expectation and maybe something is missed, but it's usually not a big deal, or you can change rooms or whatever. When you rent an Airbnb, there's something a lot of times about the property that's unique, and maybe it doesn't meet an expectation. You have to be honest about disclosing that, if that's going to be a deal breaker. So as long as you're clear about what the experience is going to be like, for better or for worse, and they're happy with what they're booking and the price point, then you're going to give them a good value. So, and the opposite of that is true. So what we started doing is we started video touring our locations, and we showed them all the supplies in the closets, in the kitchen, and the drawers, and they can see exactly what they're getting. So we tell them, you have 48 hours to change your mind after booking, but you get a link of a video tour of the property. And then, if you decide you don't like it, you can cancel. But usually people book and they see the video and they know exactly what they're getting. And I think that's been probably one of the game changers for us, because it really sets the expectations clearly.
That's true. And also you get fewer random questions like, oh, by the way, is there a toaster in the unit? Now they'll have the video and they'll be able to be like, oh, okay, there's the toaster, there's the coffee maker. There's
the pool towels, what do I bring for the beach? It's here's what's in the closet.
Right. You can clearly see everything.
Yeah. So I think that sort of listing accuracy is important. So, deliver it however you want, but building that expectation clearly, I think makes a big difference for a guest experience.
Yeah. And also now with Airbnb's new rules, guests can show up, and if your place is not accurate, if your listing is not accurate to the space that the guest checks into,
they can ask for a refund.
And so, that would be really unfortunate, because then you have to scramble to try to get it rebooked, and which sometimes it can happen with at the last minute, but sometimes it's difficult. It depends on where you're located, time of year, and all of that. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, those are been some really great tips, especially the message template ones, and also the sincerity that you have to have with your guests always. So thank you a lot for that, and that be it for the day. Thank you a lot for your time and for your tips. It has been very interesting to hear about your journey and story.
Oh, thank you. We really appreciate you having us on. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Into the Airbnb. We're looking for hosts and other people in the short-term rental industry to interview. If you had what we need and would like to share your experience in this podcast, please send us an email. All the info is at the end of the description.